The Agri-weather outlook is sponsored by Excalia fungicide from Valent USA.
How will the weather fare as the region heads into March? Here's John with our Agri-weather outlook.
The calendar now having turned to March, but the weather not showing any signs in the northern plains of warming up at all. That's not unusual, but this is a colder than average weather pattern, not necessarily record-setting cold. But the northern plains, it's not going to warm up much anytime over the next couple of weeks anyway. And this pattern, not in addition to being colder than average, looks fairly stormy. And because it's cold, that means snowy. We've had in late February and early March now a resurgence of snow systems into the northern plains and the western part of the upper Midwest. I look for that to continue here over the next couple of weeks. Southern plains, meanwhile, also in late February, starting to get some outbreaks of severe weather and tornadoes, talking Oklahoma, Texas, into the Arklatex area, and I see at least one or two more of those potentially setting up over the next couple of weeks. So in the central part of the country, the Great Plains, it's a very active weather pattern. The jet stream kind of meandering a bit, high ridge up in Alaska. They've had some warm weather the last few weeks. The middle part of the country, the jet is just meandering. We're going to see some of those early warm days of spring where the deep south gets up into the 80s, but it's going to stay consistently near and below freezing across the Rocky Mountains, the northern tier of states, and a little bit warmer, but still cooler than average for places like Iowa and southern Wisconsin. The contrast between the warmth in the south and the cold in the north opens up the potential for storms, especially whenever you see a southwest to northeast curvature of the jet stream, and boom, we'll start getting into that toward the end of this week. And I do think this will open up the potential for another round of southern plains storms and northern plains snowfall sometime around the weekend. I don't know if it'll exactly be Friday or Saturday or Sunday, and I can't define the track of the storm exactly, but definitely some weather there. As we go into the second week here of this weather pattern, still looking pretty cold. The really frigid air, sub-zero highs, that retreats, of course, in March. You don't typically get that south of the Canadian border in March, except for a stray day into North Dakota, and I don't see any of that. But it does look consistently colder than average and consistently freezing across the northern plains, and there will be potential for additional storms. This first week, March 5th through 11th, probably a couple of systems coming over the Great Plains. That will transition into rain, snow, and then rain, and on the southern flank of that, some thunderstorms. And out west, the active weather pattern may be a little bit of a breather relative to the last week or two, but still potential for a lot of heavy mountain snows and some coastal rains from northern California northward. The second week of the forecast also looking fairly snowy across the far northern plains, wet weather in the Midwest as well, a mixture of rain and snow, and very likely more thunderstorms down here in the southern plains and the deep south.